It started as a mistake, but what happened next changed how I feed my compost worms. A few seasons ago, I had a forgotten bucket of cabbage leaves left outside after a long harvest day. By the time I found it, the cabbage was in an advanced state of decay, soft, slimy, and smelling strong enough to make me regret lifting the lid. Instead of tossing it, I dumped it into my worm bed, expecting the usual slow breakdown. But within days, something unusual happened. The worms swarmed to it. They gathered in thick clusters under the rotting cabbage in a way I'd never seen with manure or kitchen scraps. It made me wonder, why would earthworms prefer foul cabbage over the rich manure I'd always considered their favorite food? That discovery sent me down a path that revealed one of nature's most overlooked composting secrets. Rotten cabbage creates the perfect microbial buffet for compost worms. The first clue lies in what happens during cabbage decomposition. When cabbage begins to rot, it's not just breaking down, it's fermenting. The sugars and soft tissues in the leaves invite a massive bloom of bacteria and fungi, the very organisms that worms rely on as their true food source. Worms don't eat vegetable matter directly, they eat the microbes that cover it. The rotting cabbage, in its slimy stage, becomes coated in a layer of active microbial life, which makes it irresistible to them. In comparison, manure, while nutrient-rich, goes through a hotter, faster decomposition that burns off many of those same microbes. Fresh manure can even repel worms due to its ammonia content until it cools and stabilizes. Rotten cabbage, however, stays cool, moist, and microbially rich, making it far more inviting. The sulfur compounds that give cabbage its distinctive smell are actually byproducts of anaerobic bacterial activity, a signal that microbial life is thriving. In a worm's world, that's not a stench, it's a dinner bell. Worms prefer soft, pre-digested material because it saves them energy. Worms don't have teeth, so the easier a material is to consume, the faster they'll swarm it. Cabbage that has softened and broken down from bacterial fermentation is almost pre-digested, requiring minimal effort for the worms to process. Manure, especially from herbivores like cows or horses, still contains coarse plant fibers that worms must work through slowly. When I compared both side by side, rotten cabbage on one side of the bin and aged manure on the other, the worms congregated heavily under the cabbage for the first week, only moving to the manure later after the cabbage was mostly gone. What that showed me was that worms, like all decomposers, go where the energy payoff is highest. Rotten cabbage has a lower carbon-to-nitrogen ratio than manure, meaning it breaks down faster and releases microbial energy more quickly. This makes it an ideal starter feed for a new worm bed, or to jumpstart activity in a sluggish compost pile. If your worm bin ever seems slow, adding a few handfuls of chopped or crushed cabbage, especially the outer leaves or spoiled heads, is like throwing fuel on a microbial fire. Moisture and texture play a crucial role in worm attraction. Rotten cabbage, interestingly enough, maintains a near-perfect moisture level for worms, about 80% water by weight. It stays damp but never forms those compact, airless clumps like some other vegetable scraps do. When you place cabbage leaves into a compost pile or worm bin, they create a loose, aerated layer that holds humidity while still allowing for plenty of airflow. This is exactly the kind of habitat worms thrive in: dark, moist, and breathable. Now, manure, on the other hand, varies a lot depending on its source. Fresh manure can be a bit too hot or too dry, and even aged manure can compact into dense layers that limit oxygen. Since worms breathe through their skin, they really need a moist but aerated environment. Rotten cabbage just naturally provides that balance. It even acts as a humidity regulator in compost piles, holding water during dry spells and releasing it slowly as the pile heats up. If you're building a compost pile and want to attract worms quickly, just mix 1 part rotten cabbage with 3 parts brown material, like leaves or straw, and then add a light sprinkle of soil on top. Within a week, you'll probably start seeing worm trails near the cabbage sections. That's because the bacteria that colonize those rotting leaves send out chemical signals worms can actually detect from several inches away. The secret really lies in the chemistry of cabbage decomposition. When cabbage decays, it releases compounds like dimethyl sulfide, hydrogen sulfide, and acetic acid, all of which indicate a bacterial process in full swing. These compounds are byproducts of lactic acid fermentation, which is actually the same process used to make sauerkraut. In soil ecology, that sort of mild fermentation is a real microbial goldmine. It generates a soft, nutrient-rich substrate filled with enzymes, organic acids, and microbial proteins. Worms are drawn to this environment not just for the food, but also because the pH stays near neutral once those initial gases dissipate. In contrast, some manures can swing alkaline or acidic depending on their freshness and bedding material. Cabbage-based waste, when balanced with browns like straw or paper, stabilizes into a microbially active, worm-safe zone in just a matter of days. The best results, honestly, come when you pre-ferment the cabbage before adding it to your worm bed. You can do this by placing shredded cabbage in a covered bucket with just a splash of water for about a week. Once it starts to soften and smell strong, it's ready. Mix it with a bit of dry carbon material, like shredded paper or sawdust to prevent excess moisture, and lay it in thin layers. Worms will start clustering beneath it within 24 hours. If you've got a compost pile that seems a bit cold or inactive, introducing a few pounds of decomposing cabbage can restart it quickly. The bacterial bloom from the cabbage acts as a natural activator, much like adding manure, but without the risk of overheating or imbalance. It feeds not only the worms, but the entire decomposer chain, from mites and springtails to fungi and bacteria. For gardeners managing large piles, the ratio that works best is about 1 part rotten cabbage to 10 parts compostable material by weight. Mix it throughout the pile rather than just layering it on top. This ensures even microbial distribution and prevents odor buildup. Within a week, the pile temperature will rise gently, signaling renewed microbial activity. Even after the cabbage disappears, its effects last. The microbial colonies it introduces continue breaking down tougher materials long after the visible leaves are gone. It's a catalyst rather than just another ingredient. In the end, the worms teach us what soil really wants. What my accidental cabbage experiment proved is that worms aren't loyal to any one food, they're loyal to microbial activity. When something rots the right way, they come running. Rotten cabbage happens to hit every mark: soft texture, rich microbial bloom, ideal moisture, and quick nutrient release. It outperforms manure in attracting worms, not because it's more nutritious, but because it's biologically alive in all the right ways. So if you're ever short on manure or looking to boost worm activity, don't overlook your cabbage trimmings. What smells foul to you might be the best dinner your soil community ever had. If you found this guide valuable and want more proven, field-tested composting methods, make sure to subscribe to Hydrohaven and share this with your fellow growers. Here we turn garden waste into soil wealth, and every experiment teaches us a little more about how to work with nature, not against it.